Okay. My name is Ramona Sutherland. Just a quick introduction. I work for the Monroe County Sheriff's Office. I've worked here for about 13 years. For about 10 years, I worked the road patrol. And then I've been an investigator for almost 3 years. For the first year or so of my investigative career, I did like zone investigations. I worked primarily out in Henrietta. So I would take investigations from that substation out there. And about a year and a half ago, I took a position at Bavona Child Advocacy Center, and I investigate child sex crimes. So that's what I've been doing for the last year and a half. I'm a mom. I have a couple of kids. My son, he's 19, and then I have one of my daughter is 17 years old, and she's a senior in high school. I also have 3 stepsons who are a little bit older. So that's a little bit about me, and so we'll get started if everybody's ready. Ready? Okay.
Ready? Yep.
Okay. Okay. Can you see the screen?
No, not yet.
How about now?
Perfect. Yes, we can.
Okay. So I was asked to present for this workshop about stalking laws, unlawful surveillance, cell phone tracking, and other forms of non-physical harassment. I'm not a subject matter expert on this. Personally, I don't think I've ever made an arrest on stalking or unlawful surveillance. I did a lot of research on this topic. I hope I can do it justice for everybody so that, make your time worthwhile being here today. Hopefully you can learn something from that. If I don't know the answer to something, I will certainly find out. So feel free to ask questions along the way. I'll answer what I can. So I already did my introduction. I'm Ramona Sutherland with the Sheriff's Office. A couple of objectives for this presentation. This isn't really a formal thing. This is just how we usually do our presentations, with a couple of objectives. And I really wanted to talk about the mandatory arrest policy in New York State in regards to domestic violence, and then to talk about the difficulties that we have at the state level when trying to prove stalking cases. So in New York State, for domestic violence, there's a mandatory arrest law, and that basically means that in an intimate partner relationship, the police must make an arrest when either a felony is committed, and I'll go into a discussion about what a felony is. A person disobeys an order of protection by making contact when there is a stay-away order. I have a little note here that I wanted to mention, that police are not allowed to ask you as a victim if you want the abuser arrested or if you want to press charges. But the police can make an arrest if they think that this is the best course of action. So if you're in some kind of situation and it's a domestic violence issue where the police are involved and you don't necessarily want to pursue any kind of prosecution, sometimes the police can and will make an arrest if they think that's the best course of action. And a mandatory arrest does not always happen right away. It means the police must make an arrest even if the abuser leaves before the police arrive, which means they're not there at the time. We'll seek them out to make that arrest happen. Next slide. So one of the other criteria.
Sorry, Ramona.
Yeah.
Sorry, it looks like maybe the slides aren't moving along with the presentation.
Oh, they're not?
No.
Okay. What are you seeing right now?
Slide one.
Slide one? That's weird.
And it looks like, yeah, it looks like they're not showing or they're not moving along with the presentation.
Okay, should I stop sharing and start again?
Maybe switch to present mode and let's see if that helps.
Where is present mode?
It should be it's one of the options on the PowerPoint. So where it It's next to the
On here?
save button. Thank you. So click File. Thank you. So click File.
Okay.
And do you see, something that says Present?
No, I see new, open, save, save as, print, export.
Let's try maybe having you reshare your slides or reshare your screen rather.
All right.
Let's see if that
Okay.
solves it. Thanks everyone for your patience.
Sorry guys. All right, so share screen. All right. How about now?
Yes, that's great.
Good. Okay.
Thanks for everyone who pointed that out.
Yeah, sorry about that. Are you guys seeing the slides move now?
We see mandatory arrest.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. All right, so where I left off is some of the other criteria for mandatory arrest. They disobey an order of protection by committing a family offense crime. I already mentioned about that even if you're not interested in pursuing charges, sometimes the police will have to make an arrest. Even if there's no order of protection and the abuser commits a misdemeanor crime. So next slide. This is what New York State considers a domestic relationship. Current or former spouse, current or former intimate partners, including same-sex couples and teens in dating relationships, people with children in common, including adopted children, and people related by marriage, in-laws and etc., and then persons related by blood, siblings and parents.
Sorry, Roberto, do you want to, I apologize, I don't think it's working again. Do you want to send me, the presentation? I can share my screen really quick. I'm so sorry, everybody. And maybe while you do that, you can just continue to share some of the presentation as you send it to me.
Yeah. Okay. All right, let me get my email open and send you that.
Maybe if that feels okay, maybe just kind of talking or speaking to some of the themes of the presentation or the workshop.
Sure, yeah. Okay. So I just emailed you the PowerPoint. So I'll continue kind of like talking about that PowerPoint. I had included a lot of penal law sections, so the law sections for New York State in regards to the different topics today, like the stalking laws, unlawful surveillance, and non-physical harassment. New York State penal law can be really dry and mundane. I included a lot of definitions to kind of explain different parts of the crime that need to be met and what those mean. So for stalking laws in New York State, all of them except for the first degree charge are misdemeanors. And like we talked about with domestic violence laws, mandatory arrests are often felony charges and not misdemeanor charges. I talked with Bill Gargan, who is the bureau chief for domestic crimes in Monroe County, and he wanted me to make sure to include the fact that it's very hard to charge stalking in Monroe County because of the way that the statutes are written. There are a lot of either or that need to be met in order to charge somebody with these crimes. And then there's something that's written in the law that says the actor was previously clearly informed to cease that conduct. So if they're stalking somebody and they have a course of conduct that they're following, you have to clearly inform them to stop before you can move forward with making an arrest on that person. But what the law doesn't define is what does clearly informed mean? And that could take on different interpretations. So something he suggested to clearly inform somebody to cease that conduct. For instance, you could do certified letter, something that you can electronically trace, so you can send them an email, Facebook message, something along those lines. But he just wanted it to be noted that there's no clear definition of what that means. Does anybody have any questions about the stalking laws as of right now? Okay, I'll keep going. So stalking in the third degree, it has to meet a couple of different criteria. For instance, they have to have committed stalking in the fourth degree, and it has to be against 3 or more people for one of the subsections. And then the other one is they committed the crime of stalking in the fourth degree and had been previously convicted. So that's a hard law to really charge because there's so many criteria. For stalking in the third degree, there's I highlighted something that they commit the crime of stalking in the fourth degree and has been previously convicted within the preceding 10 years of stalking in the fourth degree. So now there's a time element involved in that law. Stalking in the second degree is a felony. And so I misspoke. 2 of them are misdemeanors and 2 of them are felonies. This involves weapons, and they have a whole list of different weapons, and penal law will actually give the definition of what those weapons are. So they have to be, they commit stalking in the third degree and they displayed a weapon. And then continued second degree stalking, committing the crime of stalking in the third degree and had been previously convicted. So it's difficult to charge the felony stalking statutes. And it's even hard to charge the misdemeanor, but harder for a felony. And then for stalking in the second degree, there's also one subsection that they commit the crime of stalking in the third degree against 10 or more persons, which is kind of a lot of people. And then in the first degree, stalking in the first degree, which is a D felony, you have to commit the crime of stalking in the third degree, and then in the course thereof, intentionally or recklessly cause physical injury to the victim of such crime. So I had a case example that I wanted to talk to you guys about. I actually grabbed a couple of case examples from one of the FBI agents who handles a lot of these types of cases. He gave me a bunch to talk to you guys about. So the first one I wanted to talk about was about Teddy Loria. He was recently convicted of cyberstalking. It was a domestic situation. Are you getting to the slide? There we go. All right, so Teddy Loria, 52 years old. He met his former girlfriend at work. He kind of showed some interest in her for a little while. She really wasn't interested in seeing him. But after a while, she kind of broke down, and this was after he used like a scare tactic on her. He told her that he overheard her ex-boyfriend telling somebody else that he was going to kill her. So Teddy offered to provide surveillance for her house and kind of watch over her to make sure that she's going to be okay. After a while, they started to date. Very brief romantic relationship. They dated for about 3 months. At one point, he gave her a diamond ring under the pretense that he wanted everybody to know that she was his. She wasn't comfortable with that. She didn't want to take the ring. He became very upset and started swearing at her, and so she broke down and took the ring. They ended up breaking up a short time after that, and in 2018, so about 2 years after they stopped dating, he started to stalk her. He would send threatening text messages that he was going to kill her. He would follow her in public places and confront her aggressively. He would sit outside of her house. When her daughter was outside waiting for the bus in the morning, he would be out there in his vehicle. He used a third party to pose as a process server and served her 2 false lawsuits. So she finally reported this to the police, and he was investigated. He was using burner phones to kind of evade detection. But he eventually pled guilty. Judge Elizabeth Wolford sentenced him to 24 months in federal prison, followed by 6 months of home confinement. So that was an interesting case that they gave me to talk about. So we can go to the next slide. So our records department found these statistics for me in regards to arrests that were made in the last 5 years in regards to stalking. Now, this does not include the city of Rochester or the town of Gates. So this isn't, it doesn't represent the entire Monroe County, just the outskirts of the city and not the town of Gates. So there were 154 documented reports with stalking listed as the crime. Out of that 154 reports, 71 of them were closed by arrest. 1 report was unfounded. 28 were closed with no prosecution. So that means that most likely the victim in that crime, it was a misdemeanor and they chose not to move forward with prosecution for whatever reason. 7 reports were closed because the victim was uncooperative. And that can mean many things. So we'll go to the next slide. So the federal stalking statute is something that's a lot easier to work with, and you guys can probably read that. And once it's like New York State law, where it's really kind of dry. But the really cool thing about it is that their stalking statute is a felony, and it comes with mandatory sentencing minimums. So it has more latitude when it comes to charging people because the definition isn't as difficult, and it's any electronic device. So it could mean a phone or a computer, any electronic device. And the threshold of making a case go federal versus stateside in New York State is it has to be the imminent threat of life, or at least the perception of imminent threat, along with multiple instances of the behavior. So those are the criteria involved in charging a federal statute. So the cases that I'm talking about today, most of them are federal charges. I'm not saying that they're easier to charge, but they're less convoluted. So one thing that they recommended for if you suspect that you're being stalked, documentation. So for evidence purposes, you want to make sure that you keep like a good timeline of things as they're happening, so it's easier once you decide to report to kind of backtrack and find any kind of evidence that might be there. A timely reporting is important as well, because when it comes to electronic evidence, things don't last for very long. So sometimes they'll stick around for 30 days, 60 days. It really all depends on what kind of media you're working with. So that was just a side note that I wanted to mention before we move on to the next slide. So this was another federal case. So Thomas Trafficante, he was 23 years old at the time. He was a college student, but not at SUNY Geneseo. He was dating a girl from Long Island, and she went to SUNY Geneseo, and they broke up. He wasn't really happy about that, so he started to stalk and threaten her and some of her sorority friends from the school. So that started in the fall of 2017. I think that the harassment went on from like October until December, when he was eventually arrested. He would anonymously send text to friends of his ex-girlfriend and threaten them, and he would also claim to be inside of the sorority house. So then they would call the police and have them come check the house when, you know, he wasn't there. He was nowhere near there. He actually drove by his ex-girlfriend's parents' house in Long Island and used a BB gun to shoot out a window in their house and to shoot at one of their vehicles. And at the time of his arrest in December of 2017, he had a legally possessed AR-15 rifle. And there was a lot of worry when it came time for sentencing about, you know, if this had gone on, would he have escalated to using the AR-15 rather than the BB gun for whatever he was upset about. He said he had the AR-15 for target practice. He ended up, he sent her drugs, illegal drugs, to her address at college in hopes of getting her suspended or removed from college. He had actually ordered cocaine, meth, and marijuana on the dark web, and then had it mailed to her mailbox at SUNY Geneseo, and then alerted the SUNY Geneseo police that the drugs were there in the mailbox to harass her. He posted her contact information on a prostitution website, and she received approximately 60 phone calls from people who wanted to have sex with her. He went into her chemistry account for the school. He changed the email address, and then he completed quizzes for her chemistry class, got her zeros on all of these quizzes. So I'm sure that was quite the mess to clean up for her. But he was sentenced by Judge David Larimer for cyberstalking and distribution of a controlled substance, and he received 4 years in prison. And the recommended sentencing was 30 to 37 months. And because it was such a heinous crime that he committed, the judge felt strongly in giving him a harsher sentence. So any questions on that one before we move on? No? Okay. So this was another federal case, and Charles Roberto, not sure if I pronounced that right, he had a girlfriend back in 2000 and I believe it was 14. She was underage at the time, but sent him nude photos consensually. And then after they break up, he threatens her and says he's going to put those photos out on social media. And then in 2017, he actually does that. He puts her nude photos out on social media and includes her contact information. And she received, tons of messages from people asking for more nude photos. He threatened her via text message, said that he was going to kill her, kill himself. He was going to ruin her life like she ruined his. And she kind of put up with it for a little while, where she didn't say anything to anybody about what he had done with his nude photos. So it was a bit of a challenge for the investigators and the agents to do this investigation, because she let a little bit of time go on before she made a formal report. So because of that delayed report, there were some issues with evidence. It made it kind of tricky to secure evidence. So he was sentenced by Charles Saragusa in October of this year. He received 37 months in prison. So we can move on to the next slide. Okay, so these are just some definitions about privacy in the penal law. We can kind of breeze through these pretty quickly because I'm not going to read them all the way through. There's a lot of information, and I see time's kind of moving by quick. So these are just definitions in the penal law. We can go to the next slide. This defines electronic communication for New York state law. We can go to the next slide. Just some more definitions about electronic communication. We'll go to the next slide. So this is about eavesdropping in New York state law. We can probably move past this one too. So this is New York state penal law for eavesdropping devices. I think that a lot of these types of devices are readily available on the internet. I think you can buy pretty much anything on the internet, so readily available. We can go to the next slide. So tampering. We'll probably go to the next slide. So tampering is a B misdemeanor. We'll go to the next slide. So these are the definitions for the unlawful surveillance laws, and it kind of defines how you can charge them with the particular definitions. So this one, it's the place and time when a person has a reasonable expectation of privacy, means a place and a time where a reasonable person would believe that he or she could fully disrobe in privacy. So you would think, you know, in your bedroom, in a fitting room. I'll give an example later, but like a tanning booth or something along those lines. And it defines what sexual or intimate parts are. We can go to the next slide.
Ramona, I'm curious, is tampering like messing with your phone, or adding something to your phone, or adding something into like your car or your purse or your home?
I think so, yeah. I'm thinking more along the lines of like an email account or something like that for the electronic portion of it. So to disseminate, to send out, publish, definition to sell. Go to the next slide. So this is a good case example. This David Schreier, he was originally arrested by a local police department in 2008. So what he did was he walked next door to his neighbor's house in the wee hours of the morning, and his neighbor had a door, like a front porch, and then a door, and above the door there was like an arched window. What he did was he took a camera and he held it up into the arch window, and when his neighbor got out of the shower and came out into her hallway wearing no clothes because she's on the second level of her home, and you would expect to, you know, have some privacy and be able to walk around naked in your own house if you wanted to, she sees there's a red blinking light in that window. So she, you know, gets upset, slams the door, calls 911. The police show up. They were able to trace his footsteps in the snow back to his apartment. So it was a good arrest. They arrest him on that. He ended up, he pled guilty to unlawful surveillance, and he received 5 years of probation. So they got a hold of his electronic devices after this arrest. They most likely wrote a search warrant to get like his computer and cameras, just to make sure there wasn't any other evidence on those devices. And then they actually located child pornography on his computer. So that was a result of that original arrest. He did try to appeal this. I think it was in 2012. He tried to appeal his unlawful surveillance conviction, but they upheld it, you know, citing the penal law that the recording was made at a place and time when a reasonable person would believe that he or she could fully disrobe in privacy. And I believe that there was some kind of a legal issue with his arrest for the child pornography, and that case got thrown out, in case anybody was interested. But we can move on to the next slide. So here's some more of the law for unlawful surveillance in the second degree. So these are or, so it would have to be number one for his or her or another person's amusement. And it talks about sexual or other intimate parts. And this talks about installing an imaging device. There was actually a case this year in January. I don't know if anybody heard about it or not. It's not a domestic related case, but there was an owner of a music school, and he installed cameras in the bathroom, in the female bathroom, to catch people using the bathroom. And somebody found it just kind of by accident. It fell, and she looked into the toilet to find out, you know, what fell in the toilet, and found a camera. So she grabs the camera and runs outside of the music studio because her daughter was there for lessons, and calls 911. And she's like, "What is this? What do I do?" So that was a huge case. It was a county case, and it involved trying to locate multiple people that this gentleman had images of while they were using the bathroom, and also to eliminate whether or not he was in it for the sexual gratification of children or adults. So that was an interesting case that we just had here locally. So we can go to the next slide. So here we go. There's the bathroom, the fitting room, This talks about in hotels, motels. We can go to the next slide.
Would that count also for a person's vehicle or like their cell phone, personal items, clothing, purse, wallet, things of that nature?
I'm not sure if it would fit under the unlawful surveillance or not. I think if we move up into like the first degree, it might talk about electronic. Yeah, so we can go to the next slide. Okay, go to the next slide. So the second degree is a really long statute. Okay, we can go to the next one. So that's a Class E felony. So this is the first degree. Okay, so this involves a prior conviction. So they would have to have committed the second degree charge and then have a prior conviction for the same thing. So hold on, let me go back into the other slides and see if it says anything about like the electronics. And to be honest with you, a lot of those cases that we get where involves like a cell phone tampering or something like that, depending on what they were doing, will go to the federal side of it. So I'm not really sure about that, about the car, but I can find out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we can move to the next slide. Okay, go to the next slide. Oh, there we go. Okay. So here's another local case that happened back in 2016. This is the example of the tanning booth. So a young lady was at a Zoom tan location here in Rochester, and she was tanning, and she was completely nude in the tanning booth, and she looks up and sees somebody holding like a phone or a camera over the divider. I don't know if anybody's ever been in a tanning booth, but they have like divider walls between them. So they arrested Justin Potts for that. He pled guilty to unlawful surveillance. He served just under a year in state prison, and that was a second degree charge for unlawful surveillance. And as a result, the Rochester Police Department had made that original arrest, and they had his computers, electronic devices, and he apparently over several years, multi-state, he gained access to online accounts, multiple online accounts, primarily of young women, and he saved approximately 1,000 images, like nude images that women had had on their personal accounts. And he had some computer background, computer knowledge that helped him to do that, and also with the use of Alchemsoft phone breaker software, which he used to gain access to the women's accounts. And he pled federally to an intrusion charge. He received a similar sentence to what he had gotten for the unlawful surveillance charge, and time served for that. So we can go to the next slide. So dissemination is taking the pictures and sending them out. One example would be like the revenge porn. So we can move to the next slide, which is going to be the first degree charge. So that's having the images of intimate parts. And can we go to the next slide? And he sells or publishes those. Okay, so I think this is the last case that I wanted to talk about today. Had a lot of media attention here in Rochester because it involves a former Irondequoit police officer. This is a little blurb from the newspaper about his sentencing that he got. So Bill Rozica, he was former Irondequoit police officer, and he electronically harassed his ex-girlfriend. He would send her links. He would text her links to her phone with like links to how to commit suicide. He would text her and ask her when she was going home, like, which way are you going home today? Are you going to go home this way? Are you going to go home that way? He gained access to her Walgreens account, and when she would get notifications that her prescriptions were ready, they would go to him, and then he would text her and say, oh yeah, this is ready now, when are you going to pick that up? Which is really creepy. The agent who handled this case said that Bill Rozica was very sophisticated in his harassment. He was very good at hiding his harassment and his ways of doing that. So he was able to keep himself anonymous for a little while. Originally, this was reported to the New York State Police, and they handled this investigation. And then it was turned over to the FBI. And they did some surveillance on the victim's house where they caught him driving by like multiple times in attempt to harass her. He hacked into her Comcast cable account, and a couple years ago, the Super Bowl was on and it was going into overtime, and he got into her Comcast account and he reset her cable box just as the Super Bowl was going into halftime to harass her. When he suspected that she had reported this harassment to the police, he created an alibi for himself. So he created a fake female persona online and proceeded to send himself over 100 emails, like harassing him, so that he could say, you know, I wasn't harassing anybody, somebody was harassing me. So the agent who described this case, to me, he said it was just insane, the amount that he did. It was just, there was so much that he did to this victim to harass her. And he basically said they should make a movie out of it. It's just, it's crazy what he did during this harassment period. So this was his sentence. He got 60 months in prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. So we can go to the next slide. So eavesdropping and tracking devices, like I said before, they're easy to buy. Anybody can buy them online. However, if somebody's going to try and track you through your cell phone, they physically have to have your cell phone in order to download any kind of software or apps on your phone. So we can go to the next slide. So here are some resources, and I wrote a couple of little notes about like what to do if you suspect that you are being targeted for stalking or unlawful surveillance or anything like that. Kind of follow your gut. If something seems off, it most likely is. For instance, one of the people involved in the cases that I described, she knew it was her ex because of the way he sent text messages, the way that he capitalized a certain letter in a word that normally wouldn't be capitalized, but she recognized that as him because that's something that he would always do when they would text when they were dating. So if you suspect that you are being targeted or you're a victim of one of these crimes, report it right away. You know, time is of the essence because digital evidence is time sensitive. Retain evidence. Keep detailed notes, dates, times, specific things that they did or said, and be prepared for the possibility of the arrest down the road, and then the possibility of, the possibility that you may have to testify at some point. So that being said, Monroe County Sheriff's Office, they have advocates, and they're amazing, and they will walk people who are in these cases all the way through from A to Z. So they're with them every step of the way. They explain everything thoroughly so there's no surprises, and preparation as well. Our district attorney's office is amazing in that aspect. They have advocates that work for them, and they just keep you updated and informed. There's no surprises along the way. and they'll always make sure that you're well prepared for any kind of testimony you may have to do. At the moment, the Monroe County Sheriff's Office, we're very limited in our resources as far as detecting any kind of unlawful surveillance. So I was told by my chief that we're pursuing a relationship with RIT to help us better detect forms of unlawful surveillance. So, you know, hopefully that will be coming down the road. That will be pretty exciting. We have a digital forensic unit, and the people that work in that unit, they can do extractions on cell phones, and that could be one way to detect if there is something going on in terms of unlawful surveillance on any of your devices. That's one thing we can kind of help with, but technology is constantly moving along and improving, and sometimes it's hard to keep up with. As far as like your vehicle, if you think that your vehicle has a tracker on it or something like that, if you have a mechanic that you know and trust, bring the car by, have them check it over. You don't know unless you ask, and there's no harm in asking. Or you could even come to a local police station and you can explain what you think is going on, and if they can't offer resources, they can find resources that could help you. So I think that's all the notes that I wrote down, and I think we're at the end of the presentation. Oh yeah, here we go. Feedback would be amazing. We're always looking for ways to improve and do things better, and we can't do that without your input. So whatever you guys have for suggestions, throw them my way.
Thank you, Ramona. That was really detailed, really useful. We have a question that says, if the federal statute is easier to prosecute, how does a case get to a federal prosecutor?
So it would have to start at the local side. So a local police station would take a report and start the investigation. And upon investigation, if it's found that there is something that would fit the federal statute, then we would present it to our partners in the task force who work for the FBI. We have a task force that involves partners from the FBI, Monroe County, the Rochester Police Department, so they all work together kind of jointly on these types of cases if it goes federally.
Thank you. So it sounds like, I really appreciated how you walked through like what to do if you suspect that there might be some type of cyber surveillance or tracking device. So first and foremost, it sounds like keep a lot of documentation if there is some suspicion. And then if there's any concern, contacting the police department or maybe resources in the community, like a mechanic you trust, or maybe going to like the Apple store and making sure that like your iCloud is all functioning well. I also really appreciated how you said that like for a tracking app to be downloaded or being utilized on your phone, it has to have been done like physically through the phone. That's interesting.
Yeah, I learned a lot putting this together. So like I said, I'm not an expert on this subject matter by any means, but I know I tried to find as much information as I could, and our partners with the FBI and the task force provided me with a lot of information. So they're the wealth of knowledge in this aspect.
I wonder for our attendees, are there any other questions that came up during the presentation? Any other thoughts, things came to mind? Any questions at all? You can either put them into the Q&A or to the chat box, whatever feels most comfortable. I also thought the case that you presented about the former police officer from Rochester, I think that case really resonates with a lot of people experiencing IPV and domestic violence, because a lot of times it is pretty hard to pinpoint, and it's maybe after the ending of a relationship. Okay, we have a question. So if you shared a computer with your partner, like a lot of people do, so maybe they have one desktop or one laptop during your relationship, and then you broke up, is your partner still entitled to the information on the computer? That's really interesting. Great question.
Well, that's a really great question. I was aware of, it's not a computer, but it's an email. So like it was a Time Warner account, and then there were different email addresses that branched off of that Time Warner account. The ex went into the ex-girlfriend's email account and forwarded a bunch of emails because he knew the password. But he's not allowed to do that. He thought he could get away with it because he was the administrator on the account, but you can't go into a password protected account and move information. So I would think that if the shared laptop was password protected somehow, that might kind of be off limits. But if it wasn't password protected, I don't know, what grounds there would be to protect the information that was on there. But changing passwords frequently would be a good idea. If you know anybody who works in IT, to maybe help out and strengthen passwords so that people can't guess them.
So that's interesting. It sounds like the information that's protected by a password it would fall into the protected information that you had talked about. But if there's information that is not protected by a password, then it might be a little bit fuzzier or harder to say.
Yeah.
Like if that, okay, yeah.
Yep.
So we have another question. If the federal statute is easier to prosecute, we answered that one. I apologize.
Okay.
So regarding time sensitivity, this is a good question. Is there a statute of limitation or a time frame in which pursuing expires? So thinking about people who might have exited a relationship or time is really passed, but they know that there was some cyber stalking or information that was unlawfully obtained by a former partner. Is there a statute of limitation?
Yes. So the statute of limitations for misdemeanors is shorter than that of felonies. So if it's a felony crime, you might have a couple of years before that statute of limitation runs out. Misdemeanors, they could be, 1 to 5 years before they run out. So that would make a difference too. You may not be able to go forward with any type of prosecution if a lot of time went by. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, so depending if it falls into a felony charge or a misdemeanor charge.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. So question about, is there a concise list of the information that we can hand out to clients and how they might be able to file reports or who they can consult? So this is a good question because a lot of times when this is happening, people aren't really sure like what to do or where to turn or what questions to ask or who can help them. So is there somewhere in the community, and maybe that's even something we can create if it doesn't already exist, is there a list or kind of like a how-to or what to do?
I've never seen a how-to or list to kind of organize to walk you through, but it certainly sounds like a great idea. I'm not sure if any of the resources that I had at the end of the presentation would have anything, but you're more than welcome to share those. They might have something, but it's certainly a great suggestion.
Yeah. And then can you guarantee that a survivor, somebody who's reaching out to the police, contact with a female or connect with a female officer or a trauma or DV trained officer, so someone who really is a little bit more sensitive to people who are experiencing IPV or trained in IPV DV?
You can ask. You can absolutely ask. And in Monroe County Sheriff's Office, there are more and more female deputies that are getting hired all the time. As far as specific training, I'm trying to think if we have anything that's specific to domestic violence survivors, and I can't really think of that, but you can ask specifically for a female deputy. And if there's somebody available, I know that they will help.
And then, thank you. And then a question, this is a good one too. When does a video or audio recording outside of fall into outside the area of reasonable privacy, meet the criteria for harassment or stalking. So if the video is being shared with people or groups, and it's not really electronic sharing, so sending it through email or text, but like a video or a recording was not taken with somebody's consent.
Okay, so what crime would that fall under? Is that the question? Probably regular harassment. If it's not done electronically, then let me look it up real quick.
Okay.
Now, regular harassment charge is, I believe it's a misdemeanor.
Okay.
It is a misdemeanor. It would have to be a continuous course of conduct.
Okay.
For harassment in the second degree, which is actually a violation. For harassment in the first degree, it's a B misdemeanor, and I think that involves reasonable fear of physical injury. So for just a regular harassment charge, it would be a violation, unfortunately. If it's like nude photos or something like that, that might change the charge a little bit.
Okay.
What if they were just regular pictures that were taken of somebody with their clothing on? That would be just a regular harassment.
Okay. And then
lots of good questions you guys are throwing my way.
Yeah. And then text messages and emails that are sent from a spouse that threaten withholding financial means for needs or bills. So like threats to stop paying the family bills or providing for basic needs such as food or other mental or emotional threats. So text messages or emails from a spouse that are threatening to withhold that basic needs for the home or paying for really fundamental needs in the home.
I've never encountered that personally, and from the sounds of it, I don't think it would necessarily fit the criteria for the law. Okay. For threatening.
So the question regarding so kind of piggybacking on the question about videos or audio recordings that are filmed without the person's consent and then shared not by email or text, would the person who made the recording be protected by the one-party right to record?
Oh, wow, that's a great question, and I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then another question, if you know that you have sent explicit images to a partner consensually filed together, but then you break up and you're worried that your ex will share or send them, is there a way to protect or restrict? If your partner or ex is a police officer or works closely with the police, how can a person safely approach law enforcement for help?
Wow. Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know that you can prevent them from sending them out. I mean, you can certainly ask them for the images back, but you can't guarantee that they don't have them anymore. If they are involved in law enforcement, and that is a concern that you're not going to receive the correct service from law enforcement as far as this matter, there are other law enforcement agencies. So, Monroe County is in New York State, and the New York State Police kind of oversees the whole state. So if it's a Monroe County deputy that you're concerned about, then you would reach out to the New York State Police in order to investigate this, if that was a concern.
That's really helpful.
And if it was the New York State Troopers, you would look for something bigger than them. There's always a bigger agent. Yes, exactly.
That's really helpful. How are attendees feeling? Does anyone have more questions, or do people have questions related to some answers? Any thoughts, any feedback?
If I haven't answered any of the questions like sufficiently, let me know. If you want to email me those questions, and I will find out the answers that I don't have right now for sure.
That's really helpful. And so for the attendees, if you are kind of like driving home today and you have a thought and you think like, oh, I have another question, you can reach out to info@resolve-roc.org, and then those questions can be fielded to me, and then I can provide them for Ramona, and then we can get back to you. So somebody asked if we can provide the PowerPoints. I'll talk offline with Ramona. We'll see what her comfort is like. And then I'll follow up with everybody to see if we can provide that, because there was really so much really good, rich information in the PowerPoint, so I can see how folks might find that really, really helpful. Okay. If there are, let's see if there's another question. All right, thanks everybody. So we're going to have the presentation today. It is recorded, so we are going to we will put it up on our website. So if you ever want to watch again, you can visit our website and watch the recording again. So we're really thankful, Ramona. Thank you so much. We really appreciate your time and the PowerPoint and all of your really detailed, thoughtful information. And then next month is our January workshop. It will be on financial abuse, and the presenter is Karen Delgado from the Rochester Financial Empowerment Center. So we hope to see everybody there too. All right, thank you everybody. Thank you so much, Ramona.
Bye.